Welcome. Today we're going to talk about organisational performance, which is, I think, I was going to say a bit of a strange, bit of a weird topic. That's not the right way to express it. It's a confusing topic, because once you then talk about organisational performance, the question almost becomes, so what actually is organisational performance? What do you mean by that? What are you expecting to happen if you have an organisation which is highly performing? So today we're going to start with that exact topic. What actually do we mean by organisational performance? What may it look like, so we recognise it when we're sort of beginning to get there, and then we're going to unpack it a bit and go around and look at some of the elements which in actual fact influence and will determine our level of organisational performance. So there's a number of areas we're going to look at. And organisational performance is something which is continuous, it's organic, and it's ever changing. So it's not something where you can say, I've got it, and it's now set forever. It's more like, it's got away from me, and I'll try again. It's a bit elusive, but you keep working and you keep pressurising, I think you'll find where you come to. So the first question is, quite simply, what does organisational performance look like? So what are our thoughts? If we think we've got an organisation which is highly performing, what might it look like? How do we know when we've got it? Thoughts? Organisational structure, appropriate hierarchical structure. We're making money, making the amount of money we want to make. Yep. Keeping people, retention of staff. What else?
Clear about what market we're in.
Sorry?
Being clear about what market.
Being clear about the market we're in. Yes. What other sorts of growth?
Strategy for growth.
We have a strategy for growth, so we understand where we're growing to and why maybe. Other thoughts?
Controls in place to mitigate risk.
So we have controls, so risk is being managed. Yes? It's all those things, isn't it? And probably a lot more. And maybe in its simplest form is we're actually achieving what we want to achieve. Because organisational performance at the end of the day has got to be about delivery. It's about achieving what we want to achieve, and probably in the most efficient and effective way we can. And there's not a bad expression from, his name escapes me, he'll come back to me. I'm an American basketball coach. Anyway, the expression was, no use hoping for the dream team, you've got to work with the team you've got. And often about organisational performance, we keep dreaming about the level of performance we want to have, and not recognising the level of performance we've got, and continually seeking to improve it. So I think part of organisational performance is always continuous improvement and just building from what you've got. But I think you've got to have a clear view of what you're actually aiming for and what you're seeking to achieve. If you've got no clear sense of what you're seeking to achieve, then you're never going to get there. So while we talk about organisational performance being something in my language as being soft, it's pliable, it keeps moving around, every time I think I've got a hold that something else has shifted, we still have to have a clear view of what it looks like and what we're seeking to actually deliver with it. So we use a language here which some of you would have heard before, which is a great business. And there's a brochure which we've given out which will give you some sort of definitions and talk about this a bit. But when we sit down and we say, so what are we actually trying to achieve? Where do we actually want to get our organisation to? We want an organisation, we want a business which we'll describe as a great business. But then you come back and say, well, what's a great business? Is it a good business? Is it one which is better? Is it one which is best? Where's great fit onto this sort of scale? You know, I have someone who turns around and says, I actually have a really good business. Is that a great business? Can it be something better than that? And why are you actually after great? Why are you just after good? And this comes back to where you actually want to set your measures and your metrics of what you're seeking to achieve. But we set a level which we say is great. And the way we define that, and the analogy we give to start with is a sporting analogy. We turn around and say, take the Olympics. If you are an athlete and you actually get into the Olympic team, you're good. You've managed to, in actual fact, get into the Olympic team. If you're in the Olympic team, you go and compete, you in actual fact win a medal, third place, you're certainly one of the better ones. Not only did you get in the team, but you've actually won a medal. But what about if you win silver or gold? Then you're one of the best. You're in that top one, top two. But what about if you do that each time you compete? So over a season of 5, 10, 15 years, you just break records and you break records and you break records and you keep setting the pattern which everyone's trying to follow. Then you would say, not only were they good, they're one of the greats. Now you mightn't sustain that for your entire life because there are seasons. And that may be a season in which you in actual fact achieve that level of greatness and then you go on to something else. So I think one of the things we need to recognise with organisational performance and with setting targets, you can't just continually go like that. There's going to be a period of growth, there's going to be a period of stability, there's going to be a period of growth. So we use a language that when you're trying to build a business, you should be looking to build a great business. So if you're building a great business, what would that look like in the marketplace? And if you ask the question, what is a great business, it's often hard to look around and find them. Because we always think of the top 50 companies you try and identify them, but maybe they're the types of businesses which can be great. And you've got to come down to that middle market, that SME, those family businesses, those private businesses, where in actual fact they're not chasing share prices, they're not chasing capitalisation, and therefore their focus is on something else. And maybe greatness is not defined simply by my market cap for a short period of time, but some other work. And if you go and look at the work of Jim Collins, he's tried to define great over an enduring period of time. In other words, he's looked for businesses which just don't do it once, but do it over a long period of time. He has some elements of that. So what do you think a great business may look like? What's our thoughts? What would a great business look like? Silence, dissent. Would it be a business which is setting industry standards? And what I mean by that is if you're sitting in industry, look around and say they're the ones we're chasing. They're the ones in actual fact are always stepping out. They're the ones who are finding the new level of customer need, the new level of customer demand, are creating innovations in the products and always stepping out. They're the ones that everyone aspires to work for. They're the ones which everyone benchmarks themselves against. They're the ones who you look for to see what the patterns and the trends are going to be. They would say they're leading the market. And I think having a great business has lots of elements within that. But maybe as you begin to look around in your industry, as you begin to look around for what you do, then you begin to say, who are the mentors? Who are the greats in my industry, my sector? But then you also look outside that and you say, who are the greats outside my industry? Why should I limit myself to here? I should look and see what in actual fact are those businesses, those business leaders who are in actual fact aspire to follow. So as you begin to think about organisational performance, and as you begin to think about how in actual fact, I hate the word benchmark, but as you begin to think about where can I measure myself against and look to, for example, you in actual fact begin to say, what are the companies I admire? And then you begin to say, what do those companies look like? And you see again in the booklet we have definition. And definition in actual fact goes backwards. So we'll start from the top and we'll work down. So for us, a great business is one that is highly profitable. It throws off free cash flow, so money's being tossed out. It has a growing and compounding capital value. Its customers love it. Its employees are passionate about their work. The owners thrive in it and fulfilled by their business. It finds continual opportunities for growth and innovation, and it delivers greater customer value day after day. So for us, this is a great business. You may not achieve all these things all the time, but they actually build upon each other. And it's something you're going to continually get stronger at. And where do you start? You actually start from the base. You start with a business which in actual fact is capable of delivering greater customer value day after day. And if I'm delivering greater customer value, then it means I'm stepping ahead of everyone else. I'm continually improving the value I deliver to my customers. And as I do that, I'm actually trailblazing. I'm setting the pace ahead, and everyone's beginning to follow me. And I'm beginning to define what in actual fact my customers need ahead of them actually recognising it. Well, that requires what? That requires innovation and continually seeking opportunities for growth. For that, it requires owners who in actual fact enjoy their business. In actual fact are fulfilled by their business as distinct from carrying the labour of their business forward. I might just come back to that in a moment. If you have that, customer value being generated, innovation, ideas, passion, owners who actually enjoy what they're doing, are fulfilled by what they're doing, then what do you get? You get employees who are passionate about their work. As you get employees who are passionate about their work, they're now engaging with the customers and it's growing and it's developing. Everyone's keen to come to work rather than bugging me, I've got to go to work again today. So you have a totally different culture, a totally different environment. Then the financial benefits begin to come. The profitability is there, the cash is there, the capital value is growing. But if you start at the dollar end, you'll never get to the upper end. If you start with what my customers need and build from there, you've got the right thing. We're going to sort of pass these out yet, but there's a report which we released yesterday, Succession Reset, which is looking at what we would call family business succession, but don't let the word family dissuade you. It represents about 67% of the businesses in the marketplace and over 70% of GDP. So small businesses, we all know, are big businesses. One of the findings, and this was a global research report, one of the findings which, from Australia's perspective, is a bit troubling, is within that marketplace, our tendency, our strong tendency, our favouritism is to sell our businesses. We don't see it being transferred across generational lines. We see, in actual fact, quickest, easy solution, sell it, try and take the money. And if you just pause there and you say, why is that? I think one of the reasons is we see businesses too hard. And we've raised a generation around us who in actual fact have been educated, have been sent off to university, have been encouraged to go overseas, explore your life, enjoy your life, seek your own career, seek your own future. Whatever you do, don't look what I've done because it's been such a hard life. And I just wonder whether we've created a generation coming up who in actual fact not going to be capable of stepping into the business and taking them over, which makes you wonder what's going to happen with all our businesses. But if you look at the results for the rest of the world, you look at the results for Australia, on all our indicators, sell, 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 sell. Business is not a legacy, it's not for the family, it's not what we want. And it's actually a troubling sign. And you pause there and you say, if we in actual fact think about our businesses in a positive way and enjoy what we're doing to make sure we enjoy what we're doing, we grow a very different type of business. And if we don't think this way about our businesses, how do we accept or how do we expect to actually get any level of organisational performance? It's never going to happen. I hate my job, so why should you enjoy it? Is often the message, which I think flows through. So when you think about organisational performance, your starting point is where we've got to be. What am I actually seeking to achieve from this? What does organisational performance look like for me? And maybe the first place I have to start with is me. If I don't have a team of people working within my organisation which are passionate about their job and enjoy it, and you're never going to get 100%, but you want to wait there, then I really don't want those people working in my organisation because I'm not going to achieve any level of organisational performance because I'm not going to be able to shift them. We'll come down to a fundamental model of that at the end. So we're going to look at a whole range of issues which I think impact organisational performance, and as you begin to build this picture together, become the types of tools you can use. And we click over, hit the machine, there we go. We're going to look at purpose, strategy, alignment, structure, metrics, and delivery. And the order I've moved these may be different to the order in your sheet because I was playing with last night switching things around. That's okay. You've got most of it there. Purpose, strategy, alignment, structure, metrics, and delivery. These are some of the elements which impact organisational performance. We need to get the way in which they impact it clear. And that's what we're going to go through this morning and build up. Why is purpose important? Why actually is purpose? Why would I say, in starting to talk about organisational performance, that purpose is important? Pause there for one moment. If I ask you the question and say, write down the sheet of paper in front of you now, what's the purpose for which your business exists? How would you answer that? You don't have to write it down, you don't have to answer it, just get the answer in your head. It's the elevator pitch. What's the purpose for your business? Get that clear in your mind. Step away from that and let's go back into the conversation. So why is purpose important? Surely purpose is to make money. Is the purpose of business to make money? Yep. Is anyone else interested in making money for you? No. Unless you pay them a wage. And then they're there why? Because you're paying their wage. And that's not the greatest motivation necessary to come to work. This guy was actually an accountant. He wasn't a particularly good accountant. Most people hated him. But that's okay. He still had a saying which was okay. And his expression was, I'd much rather have an employee who thinks I'm not paying them particularly much but loves their job than an employee who hates their job but loves the pay I'm giving them. Because it means that the balance is wrong. And there's that tension there, isn't there? If I'm there simply because of the money, terrible job, great money, then I'm not going to get the right return out of you. But if you're there because, the money's okay, but I love the job, I love the people, I love the clients, I love the work we do, then that's the right motivation. So come back and ask the question, what's purpose? What's purpose?
It's the reason why you get up.
It's the reason why you get up. Yep. the reason you have motivation to keep going. What else is purpose? It's the reason why your business exists. And ultimately you may say, well, it's to earn a living, but you want to come back behind that and have something else which allows you to have a passion and energy. And it's what your business is really about. You all know Peter Drucker. If you go to Peter Drucker's work and you begin to look at his work, he has an expression in there which I think is quite challenging, and I think challenging for many businesses today, challenging for many shareholder groups today, but I think we've lost the intent of the message. And the message quite simply was, businesses exist to meet the needs of a community. They make a profit so they may reinvest to further fulfill the needs of that community. Payments to shareholders and interest is merely the cost of funding to allow me to meet the needs of that community. So there's actually not a profit for shareholder return, a profit for executive return, a profit for capitalisation return in this statement. And you look at that today and people would say, well, that's just totally wrong because I don't give you the money I can make. But I think when they have that expression, they miss the point. And the point is, if you in actual fact focus on the needs of the community, if you in actual fact deliver greater value than anyone else, then the profit will take care of itself. If you suddenly become obsessed with the profit, the risk becomes that you become cost-driven, you become obsessed with putting money in my pocket, not in actual fact meeting the needs of the customer, and so you get this separation, and before you know it, people are only using it because they don't know other choice until they find another choice. So when you talk about purpose, you're in actual fact saying, maybe I need to get a real sense in my business as to why I exist. And if I make that connection correct, then that connection can allow everyone in the organisation to be focused on customer value. And if I'm focused on customer value, then it begins to move the organisation. So Medibank's on the market now, George Savvides. So George Savvides came into Medibank 9 years ago, I can't remember, at a time in which it was about to go broke. He was actually sitting, I think, on the board, and the government asked him to go in there and do a short, sit here for 6 months until we actually fact find a new CEO. It's about to go bust. So he came in there, and if you listen to him, he talked about the different stages of growth that Medibank went through, and obviously he's still there. It would be maybe 5 years ago. The brand of Medibank changed. And now you find all the other health funds that followed that pattern, maybe 6 years ago. Anyone remember how Medibank changed their branding? They had jingles, they had music, they had ads, and they had people running into things and all sorts of things. So they changed their focus from we're an insurance company to we're here to actually make you healthier. So the provision of insurance in actual fact was not sense and outcome, and it was a cost-driven strategy as well. But yes, we're an insurance company, but what can we control? We're sitting in the middle here, we have rising health costs, we have restrictions on the premium, we have a community which can't pay us, and we're being squeezed. Where do we need to apply pressure? Yes, we can apply pressure to cost to a certain level, but what about if we can get our community to, in actual fact, begin to get healthier? And I can't remember the figures, someone here may know them, but it was something like 5% of that population represented, I don't know, more than 50% of the costs. So a very small group of people were in actual fact eating up all the health expenses, and I'm sure that still continues. But they fundamentally shifted the business to turn around and say, well, we're actually interested in making people healthier. I can't remember the actual line they used. But now you look at all the insurance funds are all doing the same thing. Why? Because it actually impacts their business, but more importantly, it redefines their business for them. It redefines their business. There's another example which I'll give, which I've got to find new examples because I keep using this one as well. But this is a furniture company, is a real company. And they in actual fact are part of a global group. They used to bring in furniture to Australia, it was outdoor furniture. I think they still do. It's been quite a few years since I touched base with them. And they were struggling in the marketplace. And this was a session which was about 16 team members there, 15 guys, one girl, sitting out in the hotel somewhere we were. And it was a strategy planning session. And they were talking about their business. And the opening questions were, so what do you do in your business? What is your business about? And it was, well, we import furniture. We import outdoor furniture. We're part of a global group, that's what we do. Import and distribute. Single stack. So we furniture? Yeah. How good is it? It's the best. You sort of get these single statement answers out of these guys. Say, okay, why is it the best? Then they started to open up. It was about the quality of the aluminium they used, the welding they had, the fittings they had. It was in actual fact far ahead of all their competitors. They continued to unpack that. They talked about how they in actual fact had a global design house. And not only was it in actual fact the best furniture you could buy in terms of the quality, but also in terms of design. And what used to happen is they would bring something out, and then within 6 months the competitors would be on the marketplace with a copy. It would be thinner, cheaper, it would fall apart, but people would not recognise that. So as we started to unpack this in this sort of open discussion, it turned around and said, well, do people actually recognise the quality of furniture? Probably not. Why? Because we don't tell them. So there's no material, sales material, on the furniture which actually says the quality, the thickness, the welding, anything like that. No. Do you train the sales staff? Because it distributes out to the Myers, David Jones, all those sorts of people. Oh yeah, but they keep changing, probably won't do that particularly well. So now I have a product which is costing me more to bring in, which I'm not marketing particularly well, and not actually showing the value differentiation, and I'm being driven out of the market because I can't sustain my margins. So this went on for a while until the single woman there put her hand up and said, that's all true, that's all great, but we still actually don't understand as a group why people buy our furniture. It wasn't quite. She was a marketing person. Why? Because in actual fact it is in our design, it is in our photography, it is in our marketing. Because people look at our furniture and they don't see furniture, they see lifestyle. They see the way in which the family is going to come together, they see the intimate settings, they see the relaxation. And people go buy our furniture because they see it in the magazines and they see the type of life they believe they can grab. So are they a company which in actual fact, this is where they start to shift themselves, imports furniture which they struggle selling because they can't differentiate their product, or are they in fact a company which in actual fact creates lifestyles and takes the stress every day away? And they shifted their focus, and so they shifted their focus and gave them that margin differentiation. So the question for them was, so what actual business are we in? Do I bring a chair in so you can sit down, or do I do something else? So often when you begin to think about purpose and you begin to say, what do I do? Where it lies is in the need you fulfill in the community. And that begins to give you a value proposition. Because if I fulfill your needs far greater than anyone else, then you'll be a loyal customer because you're connected to me. The revenue will flow, the profit will flow, the margin differentiation will flow, the loyalty will flow, crazy fanatical fans will flow. Why do people go out and buy iPhones and those sorts of things still? Has anyone got a new iPhone 6 yet? I'm waiting to see if they actually do bend. Do they bend? Yours hasn't bent yet? You haven't tried doing this just to prove it does? I'm going to wait a few months and I'll get mine. So when you think about purpose, the starting point for organisational performance is actually defining purpose. So as you begin to recruit people, as they begin to come work for you, what are they there for? And there's a final example I'll give you on purpose which sticks in my mind. And it's a company we're doing some work for. We went out to the offices. You know how you go to the offices, you see your mission statements, all those sorts of things sitting up there, whacked up. On the centre of the reception, the mission statement, our mission statement is to achieve a turnover, I think it was $120 million. Sit down, okay, what's your turnover? $150 million. So they actually got past it, but obviously that didn't mean much anymore. And it had been for a few years ago, but it was purely to drive the turnover figure. Not what their profitability was, they weren't particularly profitable. That was part of their problem, their margins weren't high enough. So purpose is quite important. I think purpose begins to drive the foundation. Purpose allows you, it's another conversation, to set a strategy. So the first part was purpose. The second element which we put up there, and your slides have been assigned to order, was in actual fact strategy. And I want to talk about strategy for a moment. Strategy is one thing. How would you define strategy? I'll put the word up on the board so you're going to cheat. When you think of strategic business planning, when you think of strategy, what's it actually about? How are you going to compete in the marketplace? It has one single sole purpose. How am I going to compete in the marketplace? And we talk about strategic business plans, we talk about business plans, we talk about operational plans, we talk about all these things. They all dovetail down and dovetail up, whichever way you want to look at that as they flow backwards and forwards. Some are a longer term expression, sometimes a shorter term expression, sometimes for one area. But ultimately our strategy is how we're going to compete. What are we competing for? Yes, we'll make money, but that's one side. But what are we competing for? To deliver on our purpose. What are we competing for? To achieve our goals. Who are we competing against? Everyone, including ourselves. And often we do compete against ourselves because we trip over our own feet. So when you think about the expression of your strategy, what you're really talking about is, how am I going to achieve what I want to achieve? How am I going to achieve what I want to achieve? And that can be expressed in many different ways, but at the most fundamental, basic level, my strategy is how I'm going to compete. I have a certain place I'm going to. Maybe it's expressed as a purpose, maybe it's expressed as a vision, maybe it's expressed as a mission statement, maybe I just have a set of goals, maybe they're more metric, goal-oriented than others, but there's somewhere I'm going to. In a marketplace where I need to define the marketplace, I've got to win customers, I've got to do it profitably, I've got to beat competition, I've got to beat all the stuff which happens in my own business which stops me from doing what I'm trying to achieve, and all the other things which are happening. And this is my strategy. And this is how I'm going to run the race I'm going to run. And there's an element which sits in there, and there's an expression which goes back to I think it was Alfred Chandler, some guy. And he turned around and basically said, I've got to make sure I get this the right way because I keep spinning around, that structure is a function of strategy. So what you first do is you define what your strategy is going to be, and then you in actual fact develop the structure to deliver it. And that's a nice, simple, linear message. But the reality is, the strategy I actually create is a function of my structure, because if I'm not capable of delivering it, it'll never happen. So you actually can't say, here's my strategy, here's the structure, now go do it. You've actually got to say, well, what sort of an organisation have I got? What strategies is it capable of delivering? Now what have I got to do? What can I do? So strategy becomes intertwined in organisational performance from the very beginning. Because I can't actually develop a strategy unless I know the type of organisation I've got which is capable of delivering. And you see it becomes a little bit of a circle. And in essence, I continually try to make my organisation stronger and better so I can deliver better strategies. But if I'm just not capable of delivering on something, then it's no use pursuing it. And we'll dig into that a bit more. So this is not a strategy session, but I just wanted to talk through some of the elements which fit in there so we just get this in line. We always start with the history. If we don't understand where we came from, I actually don't understand my ability to go forward. And if we think of ourselves as individuals, I was born, I had certain parents, I went to certain schools, some good things happened to me, some bad things happened to me, all through my life up until now, and it's made me the person who I am. That allows me to do certain things well and other things not well. Businesses are no different. Businesses are no different. So you need to understand where you've come from before you try and begin to look at where you can go to see where you're strong and where you're weak and where you may need to grow into. So you always start with history. You then look at what we call the strategic analysis of thinking. What is the market I'm in? Who am I competing against? And where am I best positioned? And positioning is a continual thing. The third aspect then becomes, what's the organisation I've got? What's my purpose? What's my values? How am I structured? We'll talk about that. And what am I capable of doing? So once I understand my history, I understand how I wish to position myself in the marketplace, I understand the type of organisation I've got, I can then create my strategy. I've got the pieces on the ground. So organisational performance is fundamental to actually having an effective strategy and competing. We then go through and we begin to talk about, so this is how I'm going to compete, how robust is it for the future? You know, what are the sorts of scenarios can I come up against? Am I going to be effective in the future? Do the dollars work? Is risk mitigated? And then finally we come to, and can I actually deliver? We're going to bring it to life, we're going to look at that in a few minutes and unpack that bit. So when you think of organisational performance, do not disconnect from strategy because it's so intertwined. It's the other side of the coin, you can't. But as you begin to build your strategy, you in actual fact begin to define how you can perform. And there's a linchpin, and you'll see this in the slides. This is what we call organisational alignment. And the point I want to make is the first part of organisational alignment is my objectives. Where's my strategic objectives come from? My strategic plan. From my strategy, I have certain goals, certain objectives. That is my starting point for my organisational performance. Why? Well, if I'm performing for what purpose? What am I seeking to achieve? It comes back to those initial questions. What am I actually seeking to get my organisation to do, to achieve, to deliver on? If I don't know what you want me to do, how do you expect me to do it? It's a pretty simple message. So I'll walk through this alignment diagram and then we're going to unpack some of the elements which are in there. So you start with the first one, strategic objectives. Do you have clear, concise, simple, articulated goals, objectives which you're seeking to achieve. How many should you have? For your organisation looking forward, I don't mind whether it's 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, how many goals do you think you should have as an organisation? We say 3 to 5 generally. Because if you're struggling with more than 3 to 5 things, it's too many to do. Now that may tear down, so those 3 may expand out because you begin to look at the elements in there. But sitting at a board level, at a leadership level, if I'm trying to deliver on 3 to 5 things, then I've got my hands full. You've got to be careful how these multiply out. The best one I've seen is those goals, I think there wasn't more than 3 to 5, I think maybe 8 or 9, being multiplied across the organisation to 50 typed A4 pages. Was the goals they were going to deliver during the year. Because it was, here's the goal, how does it apply to me? Let me now articulate that, so each one of those I have to have something for. Now let me pass that down to someone else. So everyone's got a little checklist. And if everyone ticks off their box, we'll achieve it. And checklists generally don't deliver much. So I would say 3 to 5 strategic objectives. And we'll talk about how you deliver on those. But that really is your starting point. You then begin to go from, I have my objectives, to, am I actually focused on them? Do I actually structure myself in a way which focuses on them? And we're going to look at that again also, but the expression I'll use here, the statement I'll say here, your organisational chart is not how you structure. When we talk about structure, we talk about how we function and work. Your organisational chart is about authority levels and control levels. It's not about how you work as an organisation. We'll look at some ways you can express that. But am I actually functioning in a way which focuses me on the objectives I have set? Am I measuring the right things? Business performance metrics. If you don't measure, you don't get it. Am I in actual fact allocating resources where I should be allocating them? If I'm not allocating, they're not being resourced, won't be delivered. Values, culture, guiding principles, do they actually support what I'm seeking to achieve? And am I rewarding people the right way? And it's one of the most basic things you see often, is I'm actually not rewarding people to deliver what I want them to deliver. I actually don't have the dots joined. So the very basic model of organisational performance, if you sat down and you said, let me write down the objectives for my organisation, 3 to 5, let me think about how we've structured ourselves to actually deliver on those, let me think what I'm measuring, am I measuring the right things? Am I actually making decisions which are allocating the resources to where they should be? How do values, cultures and principles tie back to that to actually reward people the right way? If you sit down, you get a straight line going through all of those, you're going to find, through no other reason than having those aligned, that your performance will increase. Why? Because actually everyone's focused on the same objectives. And they're being rewarded and resourced and equipped to deliver on those objectives. And if everyone's focused on the same objectives, you'll get the momentum and the energy going forward. But when you do that exercise, you will find it's like that. Lots of disconnects and all over the place. So your starting point for organisational performance is, I believe, this. This is your fundamental starting point. All the bunnies tie up in a nice, single, easy line. Key elements which hang off either end, we're going to look at. First one we've looked at is out here. Do I actually have a set of objectives which have been correctly structured? Has my strategy created a set of objectives which are right for me? I said this is not a strategy session, but you've got to make sure they're right. Strategy is continuous. Strategy is not, what's the word, static. So when you hear someone turn around and say, my strategic plan expires in 2016, so I'm going to look at it again, you know you've got a problem. I have set a strategic plan, but it's continuing, evolving, emerging. I can't just leave it sitting on the shelf. It's continuous. But then I've got to have objectives which are meaningful and real. So if your objective is, I wish to be an employee of choice, to me it's sitting too far away from where you need to be. So they're real. When we come down to the other end, we're going to look at delivery. And delivery, I think, is where organisational performance touches the road. If you have all of these things in line, then you get delivery. And delivery is ultimately what we're seeking to achieve. Does that make sense as a very simple diagram? It's a bit blurred, it's not your eyesight, but just getting all these things in line and doing that. So when we go in and someone says, we're just not getting anywhere, people are not working well, teams are not delivering, people are not happy, then we always sit back. So let's just map this out. Let's just get all your documents together. Let's see how your board meetings are running. Let's see how you communicate with people. Let's see how you reward people. What are the messages you're giving? and just lay it out. We actually just get like behind you a big board and just stick all these things up on the board, and you go through and say, so this is your strategic plan and your objectives, but this is how you've structured your organisation. And these are the things which you measure. And then you go through and you put all those up and they step back and go, well, okay, none of these things tie together. And that's why you're not performing well. So that's your basic test. I want to talk about structure. When you think about an organisational structure, what's it look like? If you go into a business and you say, show me how you structure, what do you think they'll pull out?
Sure.
Yeah, organisational chart. Here I am sitting at the top. These are the people who report to me. I have 5 direct line reports. These are the people who report to them. This is the way I set up my divisions. And it's always see, I'm on top. Never am I on the bottom. I'm always have to be on top. Can't be a reverse pyramid. But often that's what's happening. You're standing there carrying it away as you're walking around. So what do you think actually makes up structure? I might throw a question here to ABA students, because they can't remember what the 7 S's are. So when you think about the actual structure of an organisation, you're actually talking about how it works. You're actually talking about how it works. You're looking more as a mechanical diagram, I think. It's more of a, what could be a systems diagram, but it's something which is organic, it's moving, it's growing. So what do you think impacts the way an organisation is structured? Let's ask the question that way. Systems. It's the style. It's the type of leadership you have. It's the way you actually physically do structure. That's an organisational structure, the hierarchical structure. It's all of these sorts of things which actually impact it. But we think there's a good way to draw it. This is not ours. This is by Pittsburgh, and I would say a PhD student probably worked with him. And we've got a number of these which we'll look at. We've got some samples which you don't have in your package, which we'll put up here, which is some we've done for clients. It's the way you actually look at your organisation. So if you are asked, and this again is a good exercise, give people an A3 sheet of paper and a stack of coloured pencils and say, draw how this organisation works. Experience tells us the accountants will take a black pencil and draw a stick figure. For some reason, we seem to struggle with those diagrams. You'll find you have some very creative people, and we've also found some which are quite disturbing. But anyway, the way in which people think of the way in which things work. It's a diagram of how you actually function. So here's a newspaper. So what have they got sitting here? Finance, purchasing, HR, administration, promotion, IT got sitting up the top. They've created this a funnel, news, advertising, letters, photos, comics. They're coming from society. So we're going in the community and we're grabbing all of this stuff. We're preparing content and making up the pages, we're pinning, distributing, and we're pushing it back into society. So that's a pretty simple diagram, isn't it? So as a newspaper, what do? We go out to the community, we gather all of this stuff in, we process it all the way through, and we kick it back to them in another form. And if you do a digital overlay on that, you would go from basically printing to, obviously, some other form of distribution. And they have financing, purchasing, HR administration, promotion, IT, sitting on one side, but they see themselves basically as a funnel. Suck in, change, push out. And that's probably a fair diagram. So if you looked at that and you turned around and you said, how should we organise ourselves and where should my focus be to actually do this? And this is an article, if anyone wants a reference, we can give the article. It's probably 15 years old now. It's quite an old article. But the other aspects of it, and I don't think it's not necessarily shows it, if my memory serves correct, is you can then put colour and weightings. So at times when we've done this for clients and we've actually got to a stage, and it's not easy for clients to get their head around this, or businesses, we actually get a diagram which works for you, then put a weighting to it. How many dollars do you spend in these areas? How many staff do you put in it? And often you'll find critical areas, such as, for example, distributor, stock management, which are totally under-resourced, but they see this as such a critical element in the delivery of their business value. So you can put a weighting behind this. And this is a good exercise to do because as you actually get your senior management team or different people to draw the diagram of how you work, and you then bring them all together, you actually begin to get a consensus of how we need to function as an organisation. And then you can begin to tear up your organisational chart and say, let's redraw it for the way we actually need to work. electrode components, procurement, testing, inventory, picking, packaging, delivery, customer, catalogs, orders, technical support. So you can see what they're doing is they're drawing in product, they're building into an inventory, picking and packaging, back out to customers, a loop through technical support, orders and catalogs. It's just a flow diagram. It's a flow diagram of how they work. And you would say, so what seems to be most important? Well, customers and technical support, there seems to be a strong connection in there, that would make sense. Procurement appears to be quite important. They obviously, interesting that they see, remember this is old, these diagrams, that when actual fact marketing through catalogs, that the web seems to be quite important for technical support. You would find today that's probably shifted a bit. Web is still important, but now our marketing is probably up to the web as well. Picking, packaging, and delivery. And inventory. So procurement, inventory, the customer, technical support, the rest is flow. But this is how they've reflected their business. And again, it allows them to step back and say, so if I want to tune this and I want to get this really working well, what are the key areas I actually need to focus on? And this is what these diagrams and thinking about structure allows you to do. Medical frontiers. So they have national offices. What do the national offices do? Arranging finance, seeks volunteers, train staff, organises operations. They then have remote locations. What do they then do? Healthcare professionals, money and supplies into that. So we have a, as you can see from here, a series of national offices spread globally, and they have a specific role in our organisation. Their role is to get money together, to get volunteers and donations, to train staff, and to basically fundamentally organise the dispatch of operations. We need public donations, we need healthcare volunteers coming in to feed ourselves, but then we need capability to drop a site in place. A very simple diagram for quite a complex organisation, but if you step away from that and you're trying to explain to everyone in your organisation how we function, that's a pretty simple diagram which anyone can understand, and you can begin to see the key functions. And therefore, direction, alignment, focus begins to follow from those. And they become quite simple. So again, the question I would ask you is, how do you structure your organisation? How do you actually think about it? So these ones are in black and white. These are some of the ones we've worked on with those here, we've blurred them out a bit. But again, these are just diagrams. This in actual fact, probably good, it's blurred. This in actual fact is medical radiographers. Here's their patient pool. They have a group of referrers, specialists and other medicals who refer them through. They in actual fact are location based. They have to have the locations. So where they actually site their health clinics becomes quite important. They in actual fact have a strong market presence, so their brand and their web presence is very important in penetrating into potential respondents, but also into referrers. So 2 lanes are getting in there. This allows them to get the gap fee paid, the premium on top. They then come back and say, we need to refer a patient support base. We actually need a technical flow to allow us to do the diagnostic, and now we need to have a much better communication systems, because when we've done the imaging, we need to be able to send it out to the doctors, and we need to be able to communicate with them. And then they've got their basically all the facilities management sitting down below. So for them, this allowed them to get an understanding of where their focus had to be on process, imaging technology, clinical governance, workforce and processes. So it allowed them again to bring a focus to what they were doing and to break their business out into the component parts. This is a group of doctors, large group of doctors, trying to run a business and try and get a sense of how do we actually work. This one's a bit more colourful, we must have been more capable of doing this one. This is a large business. This is a business which was going from an Australian-centric business to a global business. And they were saying, we're actually tipping over the edge. We see in the next 2 to 3 years, the bulk of our sales will be overseas, not traditionally has been onshore. And they've been working towards this. So for them, it was about supplying or sourcing raw materials. It was about the location of their manufacturing base. And they're now gone globally, so they're sourcing in a couple of different locations, they're manufacturing in a couple of locations. Sustaining quality control across that. Their hubs, as we call them, positioning of their distribution hubs and where they're going to be positioned. And then in essence, their channels out in the marketplace. And they have different channels in which they had OEM operations, they had repair operations, and straight distributor operations as a global business. They saw that their marketing effort, in actual fact, had to push across everywhere, and at the same time, their capturing of innovation was critical, because as they had grown, what they had felt is the edge they had in being innovative and bringing new products to the market they had lost as the experienced team got further and further away from the market. So in actual fact, using the marketing push across the regions to in actual fact help them capture product innovations, needs basically, and how their products were performing, and get that feeding back was quite critical. So for them, it was a business which said, we start with sourcing raw materials. We then go on to location of manufacturing operations, where we're locating them. Sustaining quality control, having our distribution hubs correctly placed, then going forward into recognising different channels we have and what countries they are, because that's opportunities for growth. Where there's one channel, maybe we can slide another channel in there. Having a global view of marketing and having a global view of capturing feedback on our products. So again, a simple diagram for them which allowed them to understand how they structure. So why do we spend so much time on structure? Because I think structure is fundamental to performance. If I'm not structured well, if I don't have a clear view of structure, I'm not understanding what I need to focus on. I'm not understanding how the bits come together in the Lego machine, in the Carno machine, and knowing how it works. Structure allows me to see what's important. And as I draw these diagrams, I should be comparing them back to one thing. How in actual fact am I intending to compete in the marketplace? If it doesn't mirror how I'm intending to compete in the marketplace, then it's not going to help me. I need cheap raw materials, well sourced. I need my manufacturing in low cost places, but I have to sustain my quality control. I have to put my distribution hubs positioning close to my customers, but not too far away from my manufacturing, because this is supply chain, this is cost. I need to understand my channels, because that's my levels of penetration into that marketplace, and I need to have a process of communicating, of dragging innovations back and reinventing my product. That's how they compete. So in our strategy processes, there's a process we call developing a competitive posture. It's how you intend to compete in the marketplace. Your structure should mirror that very much. Does it make sense? So when I think about my alignment, setting my strategic objectives is first, but then very much structuring myself the way I need to structure myself to deliver becomes quite critical. And it's not an organisational chart, it's something else. Next aspect we spoke about were metrics. We all know you get, in essence, the bottom expression, what you measure is what you get. But I think there's two aspects to it. Ignore that for the time being. The question for you is, what does success look like? And success maybe is not the same for you as it is for someone else, but it's that question of not what I measure is what I get, what should I be measuring? What should I be measuring? So when you think about alignment, it's a question of what should I be measuring? What are my goals? How am I organising myself? What therefore should I be measuring? And often we don't measure what we need to measure. Yes, there's going to be the lag indicators, this is what happened last quarter, but we want something which shows me what's going to happen in the future. And yes, you want your measures in a balanced scorecard approach because it's across a number of things. So again, I think that's pretty basic, most people get it. This was the saying I found a couple of weeks ago. I thought I actually liked it, I still like it. I am tomorrow or some future day what I established today. I am today what I established yesterday or some previous day. So this is about compounding, it's about investment, it's about measurement. If I keep measuring something, what am I going to get? An outcome from what I'm measuring. If I have measured a set of metrics for the last 12 months, where I am today very much is a function of what I've measured. Because if I haven't measured it, I haven't seen it, if I haven't seen it, I haven't focused on it, and no one's paid attention to it. So it's not a bad way to twist this expression, turn around and say, what I measure now will determine where I am in the future. If I measure the wrong things, I won't end up where I want to be. So in a performance context, if I don't get the right measures, I actually won't end up where I need to be. So measures are very much about lead. Whatever I'm measuring is what do I focus on. If I focus on sales, I'm going to forget about everything else. If I focus on gross margin, same sort of thing. But for an organisation, it's not about the financial measure, it's about a lot more. So when you're thinking about organisational performance, what do I actually need to measure to build the organisation I want? If I'm not measuring the right things today, I will never build it. So I think that expression, what I am tomorrow or some future day, is what I establish today. So what I'm measuring now will determine what I become. And what I am now is a function of what I'm measuring. So often when you go in and you say, what are the problems we're facing today? Then you look to see, well, where actually I've been measuring, but importantly, what have I not been measuring? And that's maybe a function of who I am today. Does it make sense? Yeah? So that third part, if you go back to the alignment diagram started with what are my objectives? How am I structuring myself? What am I measuring? These are pretty basic steps, but they're quite fundamental, and they just help guide us through. The other ones which are on the diagram, I might just drop back to that. So the objectives we'll talk about, structure we'll talk about, business performance metrics we'll talk about. What's allocation of resources and processes? It's your decision making, isn't it? It's your budgets. I think the fundamental element of this is how my budgets are drawn and how dollars are allocated. So fundamentally, how do you do this? You have your budgetary process to align to your strategy process. So when my strategy is developed and there's things I want to pursue, some of which are related to improving the organisation, then my budget must match it. If it's not in my budget, it doesn't happen because there's no money to do it. So my budget needs to clearly express things I want to grow and improve. If it doesn't, it won't happen. And when it's in my budget, then I need to allocate it and spend it. Otherwise, it won't happen. So the way in which decisions are made, the way in which funds are spent, the way in which monies are allocated, determines my performance. You can say whatever you want, but if you don't put the dollars where they need to be, it won't happen. So the alignment of your budgetary process with an actual fact, what you seek to achieve is quite important. Let's kick on to the next one. Values, culture, guiding principles. When you talk about culture, values is sort of a function of culture. We sort of tie them together a bit. What does culture of an organisation look like? If you had to describe culture, what would you describe it as? So? Soul of the business, yeah, good way to express it. Yeah. Personality. I often would describe it as personality because it's easy in the sense that I can look at someone and say, I know who they are as a person, I know what their personality traits are, so I know what they're good at, I know what they're bad at, I know where they can perform well, I know where they can't perform well. Well, businesses in essence have a personality. That's what their culture is, it's their personality. It's the way they think about things, it's the way they do things, it's the way they act. How does it happen? It's happened over a long period of time. You can have split personalities in the organisation depending on how fragmented it is. And it's probably come from initial leadership, then the subsequent leadership that is moulded and crafted the type of organisation is. You know, all the things we talked about along here shape all of these things, shape the culture of the organisation. Very much so. But when you're thinking about performance, you think about what is the culture of my organisation. We're going to talk about that a bit when we come into that bit, which is off-page delivery. So what's the culture of the organisation? What does the culture need to be to achieve what you want to achieve, to deliver the value you want to deliver? You've really got to try and get a handle on this. But as we all know, who is the most influential person in relation to culture? Leaders. So once it's established, it's hard to shift, but it's going to be up to the leadership group to shift that. If the leaders are not on board, it doesn't happen. What are your guiding principles? It's worthwhile just touching on that quickly. What are your guiding principles? So if you had to write down 5 things which, if employees and management did nothing else every day but follow these 5 rules, what would they be? So fundamentally as an organisation, there will be things which you need to do every time. So we have some bus people sitting in the back row because we came back from a bus conference. So what are the things you've got to do every day? Make sure the buses run on time. Make sure the bus is well maintained. Be polite to customers. There'll be some basic things like that, which you'll turn around and say they're pretty simple. They are pretty simple, but if we actually do them every day, we will be successful. And only if people understood the 3 to 5 things they need to do every day to be successful and just did those, then it would not be a problem. So this becomes quite fundamental. So simple guiding principles, we won't dig into any more, but something which are worthwhile developing. Again, what are the 3 to 5 things you need to do? Have a seat, Adam. So what are those 3 to 5 things? You should note them, you should write them, you should create them. And last one, reward structures. What you pay people to do is what they do. So again, we're not going to dig into that, I want to go into this last part, but what you pay people to do is what they do. So my reward structures must be aligned with my strategic objectives. If you pay me to do one thing, and we try and get you to do something else, what will I do? I'll do what you pay me to do. Do reward structures just have to be money? No. They have to be a lot more than money. It comes back to that original saying, I'd much rather have an employee who thinks they're a bit underpaid and loves their job, rather than I'm overpaid and I hate my job. Reward structures is about how I think about my job. And it's about the appreciation I get, the connection with the clients, the connections with the community I work within, the way you recognise my achievements and allow me to actually grow and develop. This is what reward structure is about. So we'll pause there for one moment before we kick on to the last part, which is delivery. So if you fundamentally think about alignment, you're fundamentally thinking about how your organisation is performing. And this is the sort of the overall framework which you can apply. So let's kick back to where we were. Ability to deliver. So doesn't organisational performance at the end of the day come down to one thing? My ability to deliver. It's not about hot air blowing around the room, it's my ability to deliver. It's my ability to do what I actually want to do. So let's go back to the early 1990s. Few of us were around, a few of us were born, a few of us were functioning. What happened in the early 1990s, apart from the fact we were having a global crisis in terms of dollars? This ugly animal called the internet and digitalisation came along. I'm not sure who can remember, but back at that time there was almost a fear which got created amongst large corporations where they turned around and said, what is this thing called the internet and digitalisation, and how can people set up businesses in their garage and begin to compete with me? This is not on. I have all this structure, all this investment in infrastructure, in buildings, all these sorts of things. We somehow have got to get into this thing called the internet, solve it. Money is not an issue. Go for it. Go for it. So it was, would have been late 90s, early 2000. I was at a conference which was looking at some case studies of literally the hundreds of millions of dollars which have been wasted by companies trying to pursue these things. And what was the outcome? They found that no matter how much money they threw at it, they were not capable of delivering because they were not geared to deliver in a short period of time. Their investment strategy was over 3 to 5 years. That's the time frame we move through. We can't deliver something in 6 months, it's not possible. So when you talk about organisational performance, when you talk about your ability to compete, at a most fundamental core you come down to, can I deliver quickly? Can I deliver quickly? Can I as an organisation identify the goal and can I deliver quickly? At whatever level, can I get it done? Can I get it done? And this is where organisational performance begins to express itself. So when you begin to think about organisational performance, you think firstly about getting all the bunnies in line. Is everything lined up so it's clear, it's simple, it's articulated? I'm not creating traps for people, giving them confusing messages or getting them tripped over their own feet. Done. Step back. Can I now create a culture of delivery? Can I actually create a culture within the organisation where I actually deliver? This is what we're going to do. This is why it's important. Let us now deliver. And I just keep doing that. So there are those who would say, and I think they're correct, the best competitive advantage to have is the ability to deliver. While other people are tripping over their shoes and trying to sort themselves out, an organisation which can pick something up and deliver it, then pick up the next thing and deliver it critical. It becomes part of your DNA, the ability to deliver. And this is a very significant competitive advantage which you need to think about in your organisations. Can we actually deliver on anything? Can we actually get anything done on time? Or do I have to keep screaming at people to get off their butts and actually get something done. And normally that's the message in organisations. So how do you actually create this capability to deliver? This is fundamentally what organisational performance is about. How do I do that? Systems. Yeah, systems is part of it. Processes. Yep, what else?
Reward.
Reward. It's all the things we had in that line, isn't it? Yep. Becomes part of your culture. So, accountability becomes actually part of your culture. It's who we are. We actually just deliver. We get out of bed in the morning, we come to work, we focus on what we need to do, we get it done, we go home, happy. The next day we come back to work, we do the same thing. It actually becomes part of your culture, part of your DNA. The question and the thing you've got to do is you've got to get that going. And you just got to, it's a habit forming. So you've got to beat your head against the wall to get it going, then you've got to beat your head against the wall, then you've got to beat your head against the wall, then suddenly after 3 or 4 times you now find it's actually happening. It is about process because people are now getting used to the process, but you actually now know how to deliver. So organisational performance at its core, at its most fundamental, is the ability to deliver. You need to have a way which works for you. I've just put up on the board here a very simple way which we use on what we call goal achievement. And there's a little diagram which we'll go on to. So what you need to do is map out a process. It's not in your notes. I just knocked out one of my little books and wrote it up here. This is the 8-step process we go through. Everything's got to be in 8 steps for some reason. I'm not sure why. It's just a really good number. Apparently, if you're Japanese, it's 7 steps. If you're Chinese, it's 8 steps. So the first thing you do, I'll just walk through these, is build common ground. So imagine I'm going to initiate a project. Big, small, whichever way you want it to be. First thing to do is build common ground. What does that mean? I've got a group of people together. We actually need to form a basis for what we're doing. Why are we doing this? Is it good for us? Is it good for you? Do we all want to do it? We're actually building the commitment to go forward. So you start off with building common ground. We're here as a team. What we say then is, and just before you step forward, do a pause and a check. Do we actually understand the extent of the commitment I'm making? How big a step is this? Am I about to step off a cliff and go over the edge? Check the depth. Third step, map the stones, or map the stepping stones. I've got the team together, I understand a little commitment, I've now set out all the stepping stones. I'm going to go from here to the wall. How many steps is it going to take? And I need to map those out. Fourth, signal and energise. So you actually start a project. You actually commence it. We are now starting today. Announcement made, bang, into it. Why? It's like going for a race. Don't make a false start. Don't say, oh yeah, we should have done this week, we'll start next week. You have no momentum, no energy. So you signal and energise. 5, you set it up so decisions can be made, rapid decision making. Have you ever been in a project where you turn around and say, oh, it's got to go off to the board, we can't get on the agenda for next month, we'll have to go for the month after. We didn't quite get on the agenda, we have to wait for another month. So you set the project up from the beginning so the decisions which have got to be made are pre-made or are pre-scheduled so they will be made. You don't want to lose the momentum of what you're doing. Target early adopters. You want people on your team and supporting your team who actually support you. You actually don't want all those people who don't want the project to work on your team. So you target those who are going to be supporters and you bring them online. You remove resistance. So if you know there's going to be a group of people in an area which in actual fact are not going to want this to happen, you need to focus on them and you need to deal with that resistance, and if you need to, you bypass them. And you recharge and refocus. When? This is where I am today. This is my first stepping stone. There's 10. First step achieved, recharge, refocus, re-energize, go. Start on the next step. So this is just a methodology. Build common ground, check the depth, map the stones, signal and energize, rapid decision making in place, target early adopters, remove resistance, recharge, refocus. Imagine this is a methodology you've got. You do it on 1 project, you do it on 2 projects, you go on 3 projects, you do it on 4 projects. You now have a process, but now you're building a way you do things. Now you're building a culture. Now you're creating an organisation which actually delivers. So we tie this together in something we call a gap plan. And the gap plan basically sets out the actions we're taking, the goals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is it we're seeking to achieve? What is it we wanting to achieve? So our strategic plan will normally articulate itself through into something like this. So I set out what I'm seeking to achieve, and the first thing is the compelling reason. Why is this important? This is building my common ground. Why is it important? If it's not important, why is anyone going to do it? So if I can't say this is the goal, and this is why it's important to us as a business, to you as employees, to our clients, whichever way we're going to express it, if there's not a compelling reason, then why are you wasting everyone's time doing it? So there's got to be that buy-in. This is my goal, this is a compelling reason, this is what I want to achieve. A specific, measurable outcome. 12 months' time, typically we'll kick it out for 12 months, even if things that take longer than we stage it out for 12 months. I know what the goal is, it's in simple language, I can understand it, everyone can understand it. I know the reason why it's important, I know who I'm going to go to. Now, what are the steps? Let me map those out, because then I can focus on each single step. I'm here, I have to hit the wall. I'm not going to do it in one step. It's going to take me 10, 12 steps. Lay out the 10 to 12 steps because my focus is step 1. My focus is step 2. My focus is step 3. Express this in many different ways. Chunking, cutting down at bite sizes, whatever you want to. The reality is, if you do it that way, after you've taken 5 steps and you look back, you go, we actually are achieving something here. Let's go on to the next step. We tend to make things too big and never get into them. So organisational performance at its core is about delivery. To deliver, you've got to create a culture. You've got to make sure your systems, your processes, and everything is in line. That's that alignment diagram. But ultimately, you've got to create an organisation which actually can do things. And we can all sit here and laugh about that because we know how often we struggle to get things done, even the most smallest things. But as you begin to become goal and project focused, having a system which allows you to do that is critical. And most organisations, we talk about as being change management and these things, most organisations don't have a system which is theirs. Develop a system, put a rubber stamp on it, call it a name, and make it happen. This is what sits at the management team level. It can be tiered down, different parts of the organisation. Every time we come together, we look at this and we say, this is what we need to focus on. Organisational performance is about having a purpose. It's about basically building a strategy to support that. It's about then getting your alignment in place. Part of your alignment is very much the structure. Metrics are critical because what you measure today is what you build tomorrow, and ultimately you get back to delivery. There's another element which we're not going to talk about today. This is the teaser for the future. There is an engine, we think, that lies below that, which is this blending of leadership, culture, vision into a very core strength, tying that with capabilities and customer focus, understanding where barriers are and driving things forward. That'll be a future session. So there's more to this which undersits the strength of an organisation, but at this starting level, if you begin to think about these, you'll be optimistic. Questions? I know I've talked a lot. Hang on. My mind is at the door. I think my email address is on the slides. It's almost 9 o'clock, so I won't hold anyone up. If you want to ask some questions, please stay back. Otherwise, always free to send an email. And anyone who wants to, succession reset. Feel free to grab a copy of my average. Thank you, everyone.